When my sister stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, and her voice sharp as a knife, I didn't believe what I was hearing. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. The house is mine now." Those words crashed into me like a storm. This was the house where we grew up, the house that held the laughter of our parents, the memories of birthdays, the secrets whispered late at night between siblings. And now, she was cutting me off as if I was a stranger trespassing in my own life. I felt my stomach twist. My parents had only been gone for a few months, and grief still pressed heavy on me every morning I woke up. I hadn't even found the courage to go through their things yet, and now my sister was demanding that I leave, as though I had no place here anymore. How could she be so cold? Her eyes burned with something I couldn't understand. Anger, greed, maybe even jealousy. She held a stack of papers in her hand like a weapon, and when she waved them at me, I knew this wasn't just a fight between siblings. Something bigger was behind this. A will. A deal. A betrayal. My hands shook, but my voice stayed steady. "You can't just throw me out." A smirk. "Watch me." That moment changed everything. It wasn't just about a house, it was about the truth, about betrayal, about what family really meant. And I was about to find out just how deep the cracks in our family ran. The words echoed in my ears long after she said them. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. The house is mine now." My sister, Rachel, stood tall in the doorway, her arms folded like a wall between us, her eyes sharp enough to cut. She looked so sure of herself, so final in her declaration, that for a moment I felt like a trespasser in my own home. The house behind me wasn't just wood and brick. It was the heart of my childhood, the place that had carried every memory of laughter, tears, birthdays, and goodbyes. And now she wanted me gone, stripped of all claim, like a shadow being erased from a wall. I sat frozen on the sofa, the same worn-out couch our parents bought 20 years ago, staring at her as though I hadn't heard her correctly. My chest tightened, grief swelling up like water in a dam about to burst. It hadn't even been 6 months since we buried Mom and Dad, yet here was Rachel, already trying to rewrite what remained of our lives. I wanted to believe I misheard her, but the coldness in her tone made it impossible. "You can't mean that," I said, my voice cracking, half from disbelief and half from anger that was beginning to simmer inside me. "This is our house. We both grew up here." Rachel's lips curved into a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. She raised a stack of papers in her hand, shaking them like a victory flag. "Not anymore. The house belongs to me now. I've got the documents to prove it." My heart thudded hard against my ribs. I wanted to snatch the papers from her hand, tear them up, and scream that she was lying, but my body wouldn't move. Instead, I stared at her, wondering what had happened to the sister I once trusted with everything. This wasn't the girl I stayed up late with, sharing secrets in whispered voices under the covers. This wasn't the sister who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. This woman in front of me was someone else entirely. Hard, unfeeling, and filled with a greed I didn't recognize. "Dad would never," I started, but the words died in my throat. I was about to say, "Dad would never do that," but the truth was I didn't know. I had avoided dealing with the paperwork after the funeral. Rachel had volunteered to handle everything. The bills, the estate lawyer, the will. At the time, I was too numb to care. I told myself she was being responsible, that she was doing it for both of us. Now, looking at the papers in her hands and the cold fire in her eyes, I wondered if I had been blind. Rachel stepped further into the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor that once carried the pitter-patter of our childhood footsteps. "You've got 2 days," she repeated, her tone calm, almost rehearsed. "Take what's yours and leave. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Something in her voice told me this wasn't just about the house. There was venom there, an old bitterness I hadn't noticed before. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand. "You think you can just push me out? This is as much mine as it is yours." Her eyes flickered just for a moment, betraying something. Hesitation, fear, maybe even guilt, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She lifted her chin. "You're wrong. It's mine. End of discussion." With that, she turned and walked down the hall, her figure disappearing into the kitchen. I was left standing in the living room, my fists clenched, my breath uneven. The walls around me felt smaller, suffocating, as though the house itself was rejecting me. I sat back down heavily, staring at the photographs lining the mantel. Mom smiling with flour on her cheeks during one of her baking frenzies. Dad mowing the lawn with that ridiculous straw hat. Rachel and I side by side, covered in mud after playing in the rain. I looked at those photos and wondered how she could erase it all so easily. The night crawled by slowly. I couldn't sleep, not with her words gnawing at me like termites chewing through wood. At some point, I wandered into Dad's old study. It smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and the leather of his chair. His desk sat in the corner, neat but untouched since his passing. Something pulled me toward it like an invisible thread. I pulled open the drawers one by one, searching for something I didn't even know I was looking for. Old bills, notebooks filled with Dad's messy handwriting, receipts from years past. Nothing of importance. Until, at the very back of the bottom drawer, I found an envelope. My name was written across the front in my father's familiar handwriting. My hand shook as I tore it open. Inside was a letter, dated 3 months before his death. I unfolded it carefully, my eyes scanning the words. "My dear child," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get a chance to explain things in person. The house is not just a building, it's our family's soul. I want it to belong to both of you, equally, forever. Don't let bitterness or greed tear you apart. Take care of each other because one day, that will matter more than anything else." My throat tightened as I read the words over and over again, the ink blurring through my tears. This was the proof I needed. Dad had wanted us to share the house. Rachel had lied. I clutched the letter to my chest, my anger boiling into something sharp and undeniable. She had betrayed me. Not just me but Dad too. She had twisted his wishes, hidden the truth, and now stood ready to throw me out into the street. Why? What could drive her to do this? The sound of footsteps snapped me out of my thoughts. Rachel appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she saw what was in my hand. For a moment, her face drained of color, but then she masked it with her usual icy expression. "What's that?" she demanded. I held up the letter. The truth. Dad wanted us to share the house. Both of us. Her jaw tightened. She stepped closer, her hand outstretched. "Give it to me." I took a step back, clutching the paper tighter. "No, you lied to me. You've been hiding this." Her voice rose, her calm mask slipping. "You don't understand. You've always had everything. Dad's attention, Mom's love, everyone's respect. And what did I get? I was the one stuck here taking care of them when they got sick, handling everything when they died. You swooped in for the funeral and then disappeared. You don't deserve this house." "I do." Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let them sink in. Deserve. This isn't about deserving. It's about Dad's wishes. He wanted us to share it. Together. Her eyes flashed with rage, and for a second, I thought she might actually lunge at me. But instead, she turned abruptly and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. I stood there, trembling, holding on to the letter like it was my only lifeline. That night, I realized the battle had just begun. Rachel wasn't going to give up easily. She had lied, manipulated, and schemed to get her hands on the house. She wasn't going to let a piece of paper stop her. And I wasn't going to let her destroy everything Dad had built. The clock ticked past midnight, the house silent except for the faint creaks of its old bones. I sat in the study, staring out the window at the dark yard. The oak tree we used to climb as children stood tall and still, a silent witness to everything unfolding inside. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield, and I was standing on the front lines with only a letter to shield me. For the first time, I understood just how deep my sister's bitterness ran. And I knew this was only the beginning. The morning after I found Dad's letter, the house felt colder than ever. Sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, dust floating in the air like ghosts of the past. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter unfolded in front of me, staring at the words until I could almost hear Dad's voice speaking them. It was the only thing that steadied me. Without it, I might have believed Rachel's lies. But with it, I knew the truth. The problem was, the truth wasn't enough on its own. Rachel wasn't going to roll over and admit what she'd done. She was too determined, too angry, too wounded by things I still didn't fully understand. I had to find proof, something that could back up what the letter said in a way she couldn't deny. Rachel appeared in the doorway, her hair tied back, her eyes sharp and tired. She glanced at the letter on the table and then at me. For a moment, her face softened, almost as if she were going to apologize. But then her lips tightened, and the familiar wall slid back into place. "You're still here," she said flatly. I met her gaze. "This is my home too." "Not for long," she snapped, reaching for a coffee mug from the cupboard. She poured herself a cup as though we weren't standing on opposite sides of a war. "I told you. You've got until tomorrow." "Dad wanted us to share it," I said, pushing the letter across the table so she could see it again. "He put it in writing. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist." She didn't even glance at it. She took a sip of her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "That letter doesn't mean anything. The will is what matters. And the will says the house is mine." The word will landed heavy in the room. I realized then that she must have seen it, maybe even twisted it somehow. But if what the lawyer had told me during the funeral was true, the house was supposed to belong to both of us. So how had Rachel convinced herself otherwise? I leaned forward. "Then show me the will." She froze, her mug halfway to her lips. For a second, her mask cracked again, her eyes flickering with something she couldn't hide. Then she forced a smile that was too sharp to be real. "I don't owe you anything. If you don't believe me, go talk to the lawyer yourself." That was exactly what I planned to do. After she stormed out, slamming the front door behind her, I sat in silence for a long time, listening to the clock tick on the wall. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, torn between the ache of betrayal and the fire of determination. Rachel wasn't just trying to take the house. She was rewriting our father's legacy, bending it to suit her bitterness. I couldn't let that happen. By mid-afternoon, I drove into town, gripping Dad's letter so tightly it was crumpled by the time I arrived at the lawyer's office. The receptionist gave me a sympathetic look when I explained why I was there. "Mr. Whitmore will see you shortly," she said gently, as though she already knew this story wasn't going to be easy. The office smelled faintly of leather and old books. Mr. Whitmore, the lawyer who had handled Dad's estate, was a tall man with thinning hair and a face marked by years of listening to family disputes. When I sat down across from him, he folded his hands on the desk and studied me carefully. "I thought this might happen," he said quietly, before I'd even explained myself. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your sister came to see me a few weeks ago. She wanted me to redraw the documents to reflect her as the sole heir. She was insistent, but I told her I couldn't do that. The will is very clear. Your father left the house to both of you equally." Relief and anger flooded me at once. So I hadn't been wrong. Rachel had tried to manipulate even the lawyer, bending the truth to her favor. I pulled Dad's letter from my pocket and placed it on the desk. "He wrote this to me. He wanted us to share it. But she's threatening to throw me out." Mr. Whitmore adjusted his glasses and read the letter carefully. Then he nodded. "It matches exactly what's in the will. She doesn't have any legal right to force you out." A weight lifted from my chest, but only slightly. Then why is she doing this? Why would she lie? He sighed, his expression weary. Grief affects people in different ways. Some lash out, some cling to whatever they can control. Perhaps your sister feels she deserves more because she stayed here with your parents. But the law is the law. You have as much claim to that house as she does. I thanked him, but as I walked back to my car, anger churned inside me. This wasn't just grief. This was betrayal. Rachel had tried to steal from me, from Dad's memory, from everything we had left. I couldn't let her get away with it. When I returned home, the house was quiet. Rachel's car wasn't in the driveway. I let myself in and stood in the living room, staring at the family photos on the mantel. I wondered what Mom and Dad would think if they could see us now, tearing each other apart over the very house they had built with love. The thought made my chest ache. That night Rachel finally came home. I was waiting for her in the kitchen, the letter and Mr. Whitmore's words fresh in my mind. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "I went to see Whitmore," I said calmly. "He told me the truth. The house is both of ours. You can't push me out." Her face drained of color. She set her purse on the counter slowly, her fingers curling into fists. "You went behind my back. You lied to me," I shot back. "You tried to steal the house." For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but then her shoulders slumped. Her eyes shimmered with something raw, something closer to pain than anger. "You don't get it," she whispered. "I was here when they got sick. I was the one cleaning up after Dad when he couldn't move, sitting by Mom's bed when she couldn't sleep. Where were you? Off living your life. I was stuck here watching them fade away. I gave up everything. And now, after all that, you waltz back in like you deserve half of everything. You don't." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Guilt crawled up my spine, reminding me of every excuse I'd made, every phone call I cut short, every visit I delayed because life felt too busy. She wasn't wrong. I hadn't been here as much as she had. But that didn't give her the right to erase me. "I know I wasn't here like you were," I admitted, my voice low. "And I'll never forgive myself for that. But this isn't about who suffered more. This is about what Dad wanted. He wanted us to share this house. Both of us. Together." She turned away, her back rigid. "I can't do that. Not with you." "Then we're at war," I said quietly. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about everything we had buried under years of silence and jealousy, everything that had festered into bitterness. The house had become the battleground for all of it. That night, as I lay awake in the guest room, I realized something chilling. The letter might have given me the truth, and the law might be on my side, but none of that mattered if Rachel was willing to burn everything down just to have her way. And from the look in her eyes, I knew she was. The next few days passed like a storm brewing on the horizon, heavy and tense, with every word between Rachel and me sharp enough to cut. We no longer spoke like siblings. We spoke like enemies forced under the same roof, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. The air inside the house felt different, charged, brittle, ready to snap. At night, I would hear her footsteps pacing the hall, her voice low as she whispered on the phone to people I didn't know. I could feel her planning something. I didn't know what, but I knew her well enough to sense she wouldn't let things go easily. The house was becoming less of a home and more of a trap. On the third morning, I woke to find one of my boxes of belongings dumped in the driveway, the lid ripped open, clothes and books scattered in the dirt. My stomach dropped as I knelt to pick them up, dirt clinging to the sleeves of old sweaters Mom had knit for me. Rachel stood at the front door watching, her arms crossed, a smug smile tugging at her lips. "You said you weren't leaving," she called down coldly. "So I thought I'd help you pack." I clenched my jaw, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me snap. I gathered my things silently, stuffing them back into the box, but inside I was boiling. It wasn't just about property anymore. This was war, and she was making her moves. Later that afternoon, I returned to Dad's study to check if anything else had been hidden from me. I rifled through drawers and files, careful this time not to miss even a scrap of paper. That's when I found it, a small black notebook shoved between two thick binders. My father's handwriting filled its pages, notes and reminders about bills, repairs, even memories he didn't want to forget. But at the back, I discovered something that made my heart pound. There were entries about the will, dates of meetings with Mr. Whitmore, and detailed notes about splitting the property evenly between Rachel and me. One line stood out, written underlined twice. House must remain shared. No single ownership. I closed the book slowly, my hands trembling. It was another piece of proof, more ammunition against Rachel. But before I could hide it, the sound of a floorboard creaking made me freeze. I turned, and there she was, standing in the doorway with her arms folded, her eyes burning holes into me. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded. I held up the notebook. "Finding the truth. Dad wrote it all down. He wanted us to share this house, Rachel. He was clear about it." Her jaw tightened, and for the briefest second, I thought she might break down, admit defeat, and confess everything. Instead, she lunged forward, snatching at the notebook. We grappled clumsily, the book tearing slightly as we both refused to let go. Finally, I pulled free, shoving her back a step. "This ends now," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I'm taking this to Whitmore. He'll confirm everything, and you'll have nothing left to twist." Her face flushed red, her fists clenched at her sides. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Always Dad's favorite. Always the one who got away while I was stuck here cleaning up everyone else's mess. You don't deserve this house. You don't deserve anything." Her words stung, but they also revealed the truth. This wasn't about fairness, or even about ownership. This was about years of resentment boiling over. Resentment I hadn't seen building until now. I wanted to scream back, to throw every bitter memory between us in her face, but I stopped myself. Instead, I turned and walked out, the notebook pressed to my chest like a shield. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the stairs, the wind rattling the windows, the faint hum of the refrigerator. I kept the notebook and the letter hidden beneath my pillow, as though Rachel might try to steal them in the dark. At one point, I heard her door open, footsteps padding softly down the hallway, and I held my breath until they faded away. The next morning, something even stranger happened. I went into the kitchen to find the power off. The fridge was silent, the lights dead. Rachel stood by the counter, pretending to scroll through her phone, but her smirk told me everything I needed to know. "Strange, isn't it?" she said, not looking up. "Power outage, right when you need to keep your food fresh." I stared at her, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just pettiness anymore. She was trying to make the house unlivable for me, to push me out by any means she could. I left immediately and called the electric company. They confirmed what I already suspected. Someone had requested the account be switched solely into Rachel's name and then cancelled it. My name wasn't listed anywhere. The betrayal twisted deeper, cutting into my bones. She hadn't just lied. She was actively sabotaging me. I restored the account under both our names, but the realization burned in my chest. Rachel was escalating. If she was willing to cut the power, what else would she do? That evening, I tried one last time to reason with her. I found her sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. "Rachel," I said softly, "I don't want to fight. This house is big enough for both of us. We can figure out a way to make it work. Dad wanted us to. Please." She didn't look at me. Her eyes stayed on the flickering screen, her face empty. "It's too late for that." Her words chilled me. There was no warmth left in her, no trace of the sister I once knew. Just cold determination. She wouldn't stop until she had what she wanted, no matter how much damage she caused along the way. The next day, I drove back to Whitmore with the notebook and Dad's letter. He studied both documents carefully, nodding slowly. "This is clear evidence," he said. "If she continues to deny your claim, you could take this to court. You would win. Or..." The word felt heavy, final. Was that what we had come to? Turning family into legal enemies. I nodded, my heart sinking. If that's what it takes. But as I drove home, a darker thought gnawed at me. Rachel wasn't the type to surrender quietly, not even to the law. If I threatened her with court, what would she do? Something in her eyes the other night told me she was willing to burn the house down rather than share it. And I was starting to fear that wasn't just a metaphor. That evening, I walked into the living room to find one of the family photos smashed on the floor. The glass shattered, the frame splintered. It had been the picture of Mom, holding both of us as children. I knelt to pick up the pieces, my chest tight, realizing it wasn't just an accident. Rachel had destroyed it. A warning. When I looked up, she was watching from the hallway, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, we just stared at each other in silence, the broken glass glittering between us. I realized then that the house wasn't just breaking, it was breaking us, piece by piece, turning us into strangers. And unless something changed, it would destroy us both. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a battlefield where every corner hid an ambush. I moved through the rooms cautiously, listening for Rachel's footsteps, bracing for whatever new trick she had planned. Since the smashed photograph, I kept my belongings locked in the guest room and carried Dad's letter and notebook with me everywhere, tucked into my bag like precious treasure. I didn't trust her for a second. And the worst part was, I no longer trusted myself either. I didn't know if I was strong enough to keep fighting her without losing who I was. One evening, as the sun slipped low and painted the walls gold, I found the locks on my room broken. My heart sank as I pushed the door open and saw my drawers pulled out, clothes scattered, and my bag unzipped. I rushed to check, the notebook and the letter were gone. Panic surged through me like ice water. I tore through the mess, checking every corner, every pocket, every drawer again. Nothing. Looking for something. Rachel's voice came from the hallway. I spun around to see her leaning against the doorframe, holding the notebook in her hands. My stomach clenched. "Give it back," I demanded, my voice shaking. She smirked, flipping through the pages slowly. "Dad's precious words, huh? All this proof that you think makes you righteous." She closed it with a snap. "It doesn't matter. This house is mine. I don't care what you wave in my face. Rachel, that's not just a book. That's Dad's truth. You can't erase him." Her face twisted, anger flashing like lightning. "He left me with nothing but responsibility. Do you know what it was like watching them die day after day? Cleaning, crying, begging for help that never came, while you lived your life like nothing was wrong. I was already erased, long before this." Her words cut, and guilt twisted inside me, but I forced myself to stand tall. "That doesn't give you the right to destroy me too." She laughed bitterly, and for the first time I saw how far gone she was. "Destroy you? No, little sibling. I just need you gone." With that, she turned and walked away, the notebook tucked under her arm. I wanted to chase after her, to rip it back from her hands, but something in the way she moved stopped me. She wasn't bluffing anymore. She was dangerous. That night I couldn't sleep, the walls of the guest room pressing in on me. Every creak made me think she was outside my door. Every shadow looked like her standing there with a notebook, ready to tear it up. By morning my nerves were shot. I called Mr. Whitmore, explaining what had happened. He told me to come immediately to bring whatever proof I still had. But that was the problem. I had nothing left but Dad's letter, and even that I feared Rachel would steal next. When I crept into the kitchen to grab it from where I had hidden it under the silverware drawer, I froze. The letter was gone too. My heart dropped. I pulled the drawer out completely, checked beneath the lining, checked every corner. Nothing. Rachel had taken it. I stormed into the living room, fury boiling through me. She was sitting calmly on the couch, flipping through a magazine as though nothing had happened. My throat tightened with rage. "Where is it?" shouted. She looked up innocently. "Where's what?" "You know damn well Dad's letter. You stole it." She tilted her head, feigning thought. "Oh, that old thing. Maybe I threw it away. Or maybe it's in the fireplace. Who knows?" The fireplace. My chest seized with horror. I rushed over, scanning the ashes. The faint edges of paper curled black and gray told me everything. My legs went weak. She had burned it. I turned to her, my eyes burning with tears. "How could you?" "That was Dad's words. His last words to us. And you destroyed them." For the first time she didn't smirk. She stood, her expression twisted with something raw, almost desperate. "Don't you understand? As long as those things exist, you'll always have a weapon against me. I can't let that happen. I need this house. I need it to be mine. Why? My voice broke, a whisper now. Why do you need it so badly you'd destroy everything? She hesitated, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. Then she looked away, her voice low. Because it's the only thing that proves I mattered. Everything else in my life, men, jobs, friends, they all left me. The house is the only thing that stayed. If I lose it, I lose myself. Her confession hit me like a weight, softening my anger even as grief overwhelmed me. I wanted to tell her she didn't need the house to matter, that she mattered to me, that she always had. But the words stuck in my throat. We were too far gone. I left the house that day, driving to Mr. Whitmore's office empty-handed. He listened quietly as I explained what Rachel had done. His eyes filled with sympathy. It'll be harder without the documents, he admitted, but not impossible. The will itself is still recorded in my files. Your sister can't erase that. Relief stirred faintly in me, but it was drowned quickly by dread. She's not going to stop. She'll do whatever it takes. He leaned forward. Then you need to decide if you're ready for this to go to court. It won't be pretty. It could destroy your relationship completely. I almost laughed. That relationship is already gone. That night when I returned, the house was dark and silent. Rachel's car wasn't in the driveway. I stepped inside cautiously, the floor creaking beneath me. The smell of smoke lingered faintly, and my stomach churned at the thought of Dad's letter reduced to ash. I walked through the rooms, the emptiness pressing in like a weight. For the first time I wondered if the house itself was cursed, if it was meant to tear us apart, not hold us together. Upstairs in my room, I sat on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, and thought about everything Rachel had said. Her bitterness wasn't just about greed. It was about loneliness, about feeling invisible, about years of pain I had ignored because it was easier not to look. Maybe she wasn't wrong to resent me. Maybe I had left her behind without meaning to. But none of that justified what she was doing now. Close to midnight, I heard the front door slam. Her footsteps echoed through the house, sharp and unsteady. She was muttering to herself, her words slurred. I realized she had been drinking. I tensed, bracing for the storm. She banged on my door, shouting, "This is mine. Do you hear me? Mine." Her fist pounded so hard the wood rattled. I didn't answer. I sat frozen, my heart hammering, until finally her footsteps stumbled away. Moments later, I heard glass shatter downstairs. Then silence. I waited until the house was still before I crept down. In the living room, one of the picture frames was smashed on the floor. Rachel was passed out on the couch, an empty bottle dangling from her hand. I stared at her for a long time, my chest tight with a mix of anger and sorrow. She looked so small, so broken, nothing like the monster she had become in my mind. I covered her with a blanket and sat in the armchair, watching the embers of the fire fade. I realized then that no matter how this ended, court, victory, loss, the scars between us were permanent. The house had already taken too much. And yet I couldn't walk away. Not yet. The morning of the court hearing arrived like a weight pressing on my chest, and for the first time since Dad's death, I felt the reality of what was at stake. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about the truth, about what he had wanted for us, and about whether I had the strength to stand up for myself against my own sister. The courthouse loomed gray and cold, its steps echoing beneath my feet as I walked inside. My hands shook when I signed my name at the desk, and when I stepped into the courtroom, the sight of Rachel nearly knocked the air out of me. She was dressed sharply in black, her hair pulled back, her face hard and unreadable. We didn't speak, didn't even nod at each other. The silence between us was heavier than any words. When the judge entered, the air shifted, and the battle began. Mr. Whitmore spoke first, presenting the will he had witnessed, the records he still had. He laid out clearly what Dad had left behind and how the house was meant for both of us, not just one. Rachel's lawyer stood next, painting me as absent, a sibling who had abandoned family responsibilities, who had only returned when it was convenient. Rachel didn't look at me, but when she took the stand, her words sliced through me anyway. She spoke of years of pain, of caring for Mom and Dad when they were sick, of nights spent alone while I was away building a life. She painted herself as the forgotten child, the one who sacrificed everything, and though her words twisted the truth, part of them stung because I knew some of it wasn't a lie. The judge listened carefully, and every second that passed felt like a stone dragging me down. When it was my turn, my legs trembled as I rose, but once I started speaking, the words came from a place deeper than fear. I told the truth, not just about the will, not just about Dad's intentions, but about the house itself, what it meant, how it had been the one place that held our memories together, and how it was meant to bind us, not divide us. I admitted that I hadn't been there as much as I should have been, that I had failed in ways I couldn't undo. But I also made it clear that Rachel's pain didn't give her the right to erase me or to erase Dad's wishes. I told the judge about the letter Rachel burned, about the notebook she stole, and though I didn't have the physical proof anymore, my words carried the truth of it. My voice broke when I said that losing the house would mean losing the last part of Dad that still felt alive, and for the first time I saw Rachel's eyes flicker, not with anger, but with something else, something like doubt or sorrow. Still, when I sat back down, I didn't know if it was enough. The hearing stretched for hours, every moment a tug of war between the two of us. Finally, the judge leaned forward, his face grave, and delivered his decision. He acknowledged Rachel's sacrifices, acknowledged the pain she carried, but also made it clear that the law respected the will as it was written. The house, he said, was to remain shared property, belonging to both of us equally. My chest flooded with relief and dread all at once. Relief that Dad's wishes had been honored, dread because I knew what came next. I still had to face Rachel. When we left the courthouse, the cold wind cut across the steps. She walked ahead, her heels clicking sharply, then suddenly stopped and turned. For a moment we just stared at each other, the city noise buzzing around us like static. Finally she spoke, her voice low but trembling. "You don't get it, do you? Sharing means nothing. You'll never live here, not really. It'll always be mine." Her words stung, but instead of fighting back I took a breath. If the house is the only way you can feel like you matter, then keep it. But don't ever think you erased me. Dad wouldn't want us tearing each other apart like this. He wanted us to be a family. She flinched just slightly, then shook her head and walked away, leaving me standing on the courthouse steps with the papers clutched in my hand. That night, when I returned to the house, it felt emptier than ever. Rachel hadn't come back yet, and I walked through the rooms quietly, touching the walls, looking at the photos still hanging, the familiar scratches on the floorboards, the little cracks in the ceiling I had memorized as a child. For the first time, I wondered if holding on to this house was worth all the pain it had caused. Maybe Dad wanted it to keep us together, but maybe he hadn't realized it could also be the very thing that tore us apart. In the living room I sat down and whispered aloud, "What do I do, Dad?" But the house gave no answer, only the sigh of the wind through the windows. Rachel came back late, her steps unsteady again, but this time there was no shouting, no smashing of glass. She paused in the doorway, looked at me sitting there, and for a long moment we just stared at each other in silence. Her face looked tired, older somehow, and for the first time in months I saw the sister I had once known flicker behind her hardened mask. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she turned and went upstairs, and I let her go. Days turned into weeks. The court's ruling held, and the house was ours, both of ours, though what that really meant was unclear. Rachel stayed in the master bedroom, moving through the house like a ghost, while I slept in the guest room and tried to carve out some kind of peace. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was clipped, cautious. The love we had once shared as siblings was buried beneath too much anger, too much hurt. And yet, we coexisted, two wounded souls clinging to the same crumbling relic of our past. One afternoon, as I sat in the backyard, the autumn leaves scattering across the grass, I realized something with sharp clarity. The house wasn't really what I wanted to keep. What I wanted was the memory of who we used to be, of family dinners and laughter, of Dad's steady voice filling the rooms. But those memories weren't in the bricks or the wood. They were in me, in the stories I carried, in the love I still had even if it was buried deep. The house couldn't bring that back, and it couldn't fix what Rachel and I had broken. Only we could do that, and right now she wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. That evening I packed a small bag. I didn't tell Rachel where I was going, didn't leave a note. I simply walked out the door and into the night, leaving the house standing behind me in silence. It wasn't a surrender. It was a choice to stop letting the house define me, to stop letting it chain me to a battle that was eating me alive. The house would remain, Rachel would remain, and maybe one day we would find our way back to each other. Or maybe not. But either way, I carried Dad with me, carried Mom with me, carried every laugh and tear and moment that had made me who I was. That was something Rachel could never take away, no matter how hard she tried. As I walked down the street, the night air cool against my face, I felt a strange kind of peace. The house was hers to haunt, but my future was mine to claim. And though the past hurt like a scar that would never fade, I knew I was finally free. Backhand index pointing right. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more powerful and twisted life stories every week.